I'm really excited to have James Clear on the podcast today. He writes over at jamesclear.com and is the author of Atomic Habits, which was one of my favorite books in 2019. So I really hope that you'll check that out.
So one of the things that I loved about your book and about this idea is that I've always really embraced the idea that doing helps create confidence and it helps create clarity. But I love how you talk about it also helps create identity. Why do you think that is? And how can we
So,
best leverage that?
yeah, it's a good question. I had a coach in high school who said confidence is just displayed ability. And so I
Mm,
think that's very similar to what you just mentioned, and it's like he was a basketball coach. So it was like, well, if you want to be confident in your ability to make free throws, go out and shoot. And once you make 10 in a row, you'll feel much more confident about it. And so there is a certain element of like the link between doing and thinking, or doing and believing. And I think this connection between your habits and your identity, your behavior and your identity, which I talk about in Atomic Habits, is maybe taking that even one step further or one step deeper. So the basic idea is that your habits are how you embody a particular identity. So, if you make your bed each morning, you embody the identity of someone who's clean and organized. If you study biology every Tuesday night for 20 minutes, you embody the identity of someone who is studious. And so the more that you act in a particular way, it's like the more you reinforce being a certain type of person. And that's kind of the summary that I use, the like short version is that every action you take is like a vote for the type of person you want to become. And so you
yeah.
can sort of view your habits as casting votes for being a certain type of person or casting votes for a certain type of identity. And once you start to see it that way, you don't have to, we can continue the voting metaphor. Like it doesn't have to be unanimous. You don't have to be perfect. To win any election, you just need a majority of the votes. And so if you're looking to change your identity or to shift it, if you're looking to be a little more confident or reduce self-doubt, to upgrade and expand your confidence and your belief in yourself, then habits are probably the best method we have for that, because by acting it out, by doing it, even if it's just a small way, you cast a vote for being that person and you reinforce that deeper belief. So that's kind of how I think about the link between behavior and beliefs and habits and identity.
That's awesome. What does it look like when our identity doesn't our sense of being doesn't really match our doing? Have you
Mm,
ever had that moment of your life where there's just that dissonance between
yes.
who you think you wanna be, but then your actions aren't really holding it up?
Right. So this is the standard reply or standard suggestion, the more common advice that you might hear, which is fake it till you make it. So you keep
Mm,
telling yourself, I'm being this kind of person, right? I'm a healthy person. I'm a healthy person, but you're not doing it. You're not going to the gym and working out. And so in that case, when it moves that direction from beliefs first to behavior second, what you have is you have a belief, but you don't have evidence for it. And we have a word for beliefs that don't have evidence. We call it delusion, right? Like at
yeah.
some point, your brain doesn't like this mismatch between what I say I'm doing and what I'm actually doing. And so for that reason, I think fake it till you make it can only be a short-term strategy. It can only be
Mhm.
something that you use in that moment or that day to motivate you. And instead, I think behavior and beliefs, we can imagine them like a two-way street. And when you start with the belief and try to drive the behavior, you can run into this problem that we're talking about now. But my argument is the best option we have is to start with the behavior and let the belief follow. So behavior first, belief second. And now, if you go and do one push up, well, no, you didn't transform your body, but you also cannot deny that you're the type of person who doesn't miss workouts in that moment, right? Like
Mm,
you're casting a vote for being that person. And so there's something very concrete about doing the action and letting that drive the belief that you have, because it provides actual evidence, something you cannot deny because you're in the middle of doing it or you had already completed it. It's much more likely that that belief is going to stick around. Whereas if you're just trying to like affirm it or convince yourself of it, well, as soon as your behavior doesn't match up, you're like, okay, this is really, I know at some level here, I'm lying to myself. Um,
yeah.
and so I think for that reason, let the behavior drive the belief.
So for people going into this new year and really going into a new decade, which is kind of exciting, what are some ways that we can leverage this? That we can maybe plan our actions first, um, because we know we want this certain kind of identity.
Mhm. So I think the line of questioning goes something like this, which is usually when the new year starts, people ask themselves what kind of results they want.
Yeah.
I want to lose weight this year. I have a New Year's resolution to finish that book finally, or I have a New Year's resolution to reduce stress or sleep more, or take care of myself, whatever it is. And those results, certainly those are fine. There's nothing wrong with wanting that. But most New Year's resolutions fail partially because they don't get integrated into our identity. They don't become a habit that's part of our normal daily routine. They don't become part of who we view ourselves as being. We want to change our results, but we don't change who we are or how we look at ourselves. And so I think a better question to ask is not what results do I want, but what type of person could get those results? What type of identity do I need to have to be that person? So sure, your resolution or your hope might be to lose 30 pounds in 6 months, but ask yourself, who is the type of person that could lose weight? Well, maybe it's the type of person who doesn't miss workouts. Or who is the type of person that could finish that novel? Well, maybe it's the type of person who writes every day. And as soon as you shift from focusing on outcomes to focusing on identity, it changes the way that you approach building the habit, because then you start to realize, oh, all I'm really trying to do is actually not write the novel. I'm trying to sit down and write a sentence every day. All I'm trying to do is actually not lose the weight. I'm trying to wake up and make sure that I don't miss workouts. And so I think that is probably a healthier way to like merge that idea of habits and identity with the resolutions you set or the goals that you're focused on or whatever it is you want to achieve in the next year.
How have you seen people stay consistent and really stick with their habits in the long term?
Yeah, they're kind of like two problems with building habits. The first problem is like getting started, and the second problem is sticking with it or sustaining it. And we all feel this way. There's this problem when you start to build a habit, which is you kind of have this like valley of death in the beginning where you're working on it, but the long-term rewards have not shown up yet. And you hear people say that all the time. They'll say like, I've been running for a month, but I can't see any change in my body. Or I've been, like journaling for 6 months now and I still feel stressed and anxious, or, the result is not there. And this is a hallmark of any compounding process, which is the greatest returns are delayed. And
Mm.
there's this quote from the San Antonio Spurs, their NBA basketball team, who've won 5 championships. And they have this quote hanging in their locker room. And it says something like, whenever I feel like giving up, I think about the stonecutter who takes his hammer and bangs on the stone 100 times without it showing a crack. And then at the 101st blow, it splits in two. And I know that it wasn't the last one that did it, but all came before. And I think that same idea can apply to pretty much any habit, right? It's like, it's not the last sentence that you journaled that leads to calm and reduce stress. It's all the ones that came before. It's not the
Wow.
last workout you did that leads to a fit body. It's all the ones that came before. And if you're willing to embrace that idea that you need to build up a volume of work, you need to keep showing up and let those rewards start to compound over time, then you can really see the benefit of sticking with it and of using that mindset to get the habit to last. So anyway, hopefully that's a short story or an idea that gives people something to hang on to.
Yeah, that's awesome. I always encourage people, if you don't love the process, it's really hard to get the result you're looking for.
For sure.
Like, however we can figure out to love the process, or maybe pick a different result that you could enjoy the process, because it's so hard to grind through something that brings no joy or fulfillment in hopes that one day you'll have a certain result.
Well, ultimately, it's more important to fall in love with the daily habits than it is to fall
Yeah.
in love with the result. Because if you fall
Yeah.
in love with the habits, the result will happen naturally. But if you only
Yeah.
fall in love with the result, you'll always be finding yourself trying to get motivated or failing to stick with it or so on. So it really is much more about the system than it is about the goal.
Awesome. Thank you so much, James. It was awesome chatting with you.
Great. Thank you for the opportunity.
And if you guys want to hear more from James, I would check out his site, jamesclear.com. You can also find him on Instagram, or if you get our workbook, I have a link to his book, and I would highly recommend it, Atomic Habits. It was really one of my favorite books of 2019. And this is a great example of the fact that we don't have to be perfect. We just have to be a little bit more courageous every day, because adventure awaits.